Well, 2019 proved to be a difficult year for farmers across the United States. According to the American Farm Bureau Federation, the U.S. Department of Agriculture projected farm debt would reach a record high of $416 billion. Meanwhile, data from the U.S. courts showed a total of 580 bankruptcy filings just in 2019. That's up 24% from the year before. In a piece for the Washington Post, national correspondent Annie Gowen tells the story of the Lees. They took over the family dairy farm back in 2013, and now they find themselves $200,000 in debt. Annie Gowen joins us now. Annie, thanks for joining us. Help put this into context for us. What is the reality for farmers, particularly those working on family farms today, like the Lees?
Well, it's very difficult. It's been a very, very hard year for farmers. First of all, the weather has been really bad. There was historic rainfall in many places around the country, which delayed crop planting, and then it was difficult for them to get the crops out of the ground. So that was like a very difficult thing. But then at the same time, you have this backdrop of the trade war with China, which has suppressed crop prices and made it harder for farmers who are already struggling, with some bad seasons of low commodity prices to kind of come back and maintain their profitability levels.
Harder for family farms, small farms like the Lees to survive as opposed to the big, large farms across the country?
Well, the mom and pop, most farming operations are family owned, even if they're large corporations. But the mom and pops are really struggling. The Trump administration, of course, has given a large bailout for the farmers. But we actually just did a data analysis of that, and it showed that 47% of that money, which is about $14 billion so far, and it will be even more early next year, or I guess this year now, has gone to the large 10% of a larger farming operation. So the little guys are still struggling. I mean, I think the Lee family that we spent a week with earlier in December, they got $4,100, which was, of course, they were grateful for that money, but the milk check has been down about $4,000 a month. So it's helping them, but it's not going to make them whole.
Yeah, and you mentioned in your piece that when they first got the farm, they were making a decent living, and then since then things have certainly taken a turn for the worse. Now, the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities estimates that 197,000 farmers, farm workers, fishermen, forestry workers use the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, known as SNAP. You write that farmers say they sometimes struggle to qualify for it. So explain that. Why are they struggling to qualify for that?
Well, a lot of farm families, for one thing, that's the reason why I sort of decided to write the piece, because I read a blog from an organic farmer in New York State who was talking about how the dairy farmers who've been hit especially hard were feeding their cows before they fed their families. So, but historically, the dairy farmers, or any farmer actually, has had a hard time qualifying for SNAP benefits because they have such large, complicated operations, and there are pretty complicated income qualification rules for farmers, and they vary from state to state. So we actually I actually talked to a farmer who didn't qualify, and she, was arguing with them, but it didn't work. But now the Lees, who we spent time with, she wasn't sure if she was going to qualify, but she just texted me today to say that she did, and that has been a big help for her, because they were essentially existing on $175 a month for food for a family of 7, when above and beyond what their farm provided, which was chickens and chicken eggs and milk and some meat. So yeah, they were really, really kind of in a hard way.
Yeah, good to hear that they finally qualified. But if they didn't, or for the other farms who don't, what other options do they have to keep food on the table, keep the roof over their heads, keep the family farm from going under?
Well, there's mediation services. One of the statistics that we dug up for the story was, the USDA has state-affiliated mediation services in farm country, which essentially help farmers, negotiate with their lenders, if they're having a hard time, but also in some cases, some personal debt as well. They just kind of help them, figure out who to pay what when, and that the numbers for those services have gone up too. So the increasingly desperate farmers are calling in to these state mediators for help. 57% higher than when they 2015. So there are services out there. I think there's a national group, that Farm Aid. We've all heard about the Willie Nelson concert that they do, but they do help with some small grants for electricity. And then Ann Lee, again, who is a farmer we were with, we also accompanied her when she went to a food pantry for the first time. And there's amazing food pantries out there. Feeding America was the one that they went to, and she was able to get grapes and fruit for her family. She hadn't been able to get fresh fruit for the family in some time, so that was kind of a big help for them as well.
One of the lines that struck me in your piece was when Miss Lee said, "We're supposed to feed the world, and we can barely feed our families." That certainly kind of encapsulates.
Yeah, she really hit the nail on the head there. Yeah.
How's 2020 looking for these farmers? Is it projected to be a better year?
Well, we're all waiting to see what President has touted, this new first phase trade deal with China that he's supposed to be signing on January 15th at the White House. But there's been some conspicuous silence about the details on that from the China side. So I think people hope that there'll be some relief there. Certainly for the dairy market, which has been so hard hit, they've seen milk. They saw milk prices plummet for about 40% since 2014. The prices have been going up and inching closer to kind of more break-even points for them. And one of the parts of my story was where Anne came across an article from Farm Progress, where there were two dairy economists from the University of Wisconsin-Madison saying that they're projecting that the milk prices will continue to go up. So I think that will give some relief for these folks.
And farmers always have a way of staying optimistic.
They're the toughest people. I've been with them all year. They're some of the toughest people around.
Annie Gowen, thank you.
Thanks a lot.